Shalom.
Welcome to Hebrew Shebrew. We are glad you are here. We are studying the Torah portion through the lens of relationships. So every relationship that you can think of with the fellow humans that we have, that is what we are talking about when we are studying the Torah portions. So make sure you like and subscribe so you get notified when we have new videos coming out. And then also, if you are single and looking for somebody that follows the same faith as you, we have a dating website for you. We created it just for you in mind, so you could go to HebrewShebrew.com. And our videos are not just necessarily geared towards singles. It is geared towards all relationships, like we said just a couple of seconds ago. So thanks for tuning in, and let's get started.
All right, guys, the Torah portion that we're looking at this time is called Parsha Beha'aloteka, and it basically translates to when you ascend, and it's in Bamidbar, or Numbers, chapters 8 through 12. So we're just going to get kicked off. We're not going to read anything specifically from chapter 8, but we're just going to give an overview and look at some of the things that are going on there. It discusses the preparation of the Levites to be able to fulfill their obligations as their role of servants of Adonai. So one thing that we want to look at, the Levites were doing some things to prepare themselves to be able to serve. So how are you preparing for your next season of life, for the role that you hope to be appointed to? One of those might be marriage. So how are you preparing for a marriage if that's your goal? And we'll look at a few things from chapter 8 that speak to that.
Yeah.
The Levites offered a sin offering and a whole burnt offering as part of their preparation for the service, for the role they had been appointed to. The sacrifices represented were purification, atonement, and submission to Yah and to his representatives, the priests. So does your preparation for marriage, or even for another stage of your life, another season of your life, does it involve these elements?
Yeah.
Purification, atonement, and submission to Adonai. So, I mean, purification, that could represent getting washed up or cleaned up from lingering damage from your past relationships.
Yeah.
Starting the new relationship with a clean slate so that it's not burdened or stained with the old baggage. Atonement, that's just coming to peace with the past in order to be able to fully focus on the present and the future. You have to make those amends where it's necessary, so that everybody can move forward. It's not just about you, it's about everybody that got hurt. Everybody needs to move forward and not just stay in limbo from that relationship.
Exactly. If you're not able to move past what has happened to you, you're going to continue to repeat the same patterns over and over and over and over again. You can see that in your kids, in regards to them not learning the same thing or learning that one lesson that they needed to go ahead and learn. They continue to make the same mistake, the same mistake, the same mistake. So you need to learn from your past of, okay, why am I continuing to make the same mistake? What do I need to do to go ahead and change this so I can move forward? That was one of the things that when I was seeing a therapist for a little while, she's like, Sarah, you're seeing the same kind of men. You're dating the same kind of men. You've got to stop and break that pattern, whatever that pattern is. And so it's re-examining your life of, okay, why do I continue to do the same thing? What is going on in regards to this? And then changing that, and that's what I did. And didn't happen overnight. It was a process, but you re-change that pattern and then you're able to move forward, and then there's a blessing at the end. And
that's what we're all trying to get to, that blessing in the next season.
Yeah.
I mean, after you get yourself cleaned up, atonement and purification, clean, you're coming to a clean slate. Then there's the submission to Adonai, submission to Yah. And because after you've done those other two steps, you're more capable to submit or give yourself fully to Yah and his will, his plans for you. Also, getting yourself cleaned up and moved on also helps you to be more completely submitted into a relationship with a spouse. So if you've given yourself fully to Him and His will, if that means entering a new relationship, well, that's great. If you're clean and able to focus on that relationship. If that means remaining single for a season, well, great. Take the opportunity to work on yourself and become a catch.
Yeah.
The kind of husband or wife that people are searching for. Really, we want to just focus on, you need to take advantage of the season that you're in.
Yeah. And your life is always going to be a part of seasons. If we look at it, our life is a cycle. And, the word talks about that in regards to we have seasons and we have festivals that happen at different times. And if we look at our life, it's the same way. We're grateful we're not 2-year-olds anymore. We're grateful we're not 5-year-olds anymore. We're grateful that we're not teenagers anymore and that we are moving on in our life. So when you look at your life, it's a matter of, okay, what season am I in right now? We just got done doing some foster classes. So we're about to become foster parents. And we're going to be parents for the first time. And so because of that, we're having to get ready for the season that we're in. We're having to baby-proof our house. We're having to make sure that we have certain things set up for this little one that's going to be in our home. And so that's the season that we're in. You might be in a completely different season. You might be somebody who is retired. And you're like, okay, I'm done raising kids. I'm not wanting to have any more children of my own. And so you're in a different season, and that's good. We're supposed to celebrate each other's season, but move past those seasons and get on with that part and be like, okay, God, how can I move on? What do I need to do next? What's my next focus? What's my next season in life?
Yeah. Take advantage of the season that you're in.
Yeah.
We're going to move into chapter 9, and we're going to talk a little bit about this second Passover. I guess first we've got to talk about the Passover that they were able to go ahead and do. So let's read in chapter 9, verses 4 through 8.
Okay. So Moses told the sons of Israel to observe the Passover, and they observed the Passover in the first month on the 14th day of the month at twilight in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that the Lord had commanded Moses. But there were some men who were unclean because of the dead person, so that they could not observe Passover on that day. So they came before Moses and Aaron on that day, and those men said to him, though we are unclean because of the dead person, why are we restrained from presenting the offering of the Lord at its appointed time among the sons of Israel? Moses therefore said to them, wait, and I will listen to what the Lord will command concerning you.
So, there's a lot of great stuff we could take out of this conversation. Not to be excluded, we're not going to talk about it, but it's great to see when the leader doesn't know, he's like, hold up a second, let me go up the ladder and see what, the one higher than me has to say about this.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk a little bit about this second Passover and why these guys were wanting to be able to celebrate the Passover. So this is the first time that they celebrated the Passover at Mount Sinai, outside of the first Passover they did there in Egypt. And these guys, they weren't able to do it because they were in a state of tameh. They were unclean because they had come in contact with a dead body. So they weren't able to perform the Passover. They're asking, why do we have to miss out on doing the Passover? Moses approaches Adonai to see what to do in this kind of case. And then, as we're going to read in a minute, Adonai makes a provision there.
So in other words, they said, no soup for you.
No soup for me?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was, right?
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. They were like, why no soup for me?
Yeah.
So why would they be upset about not performing the Passover at the appointed time? Mm-hmm. And we get to see specifically Adonai's answer in verse 13 is very telling. So let's go ahead and see verse 13.
Verse 13. But the man who is clean and is not on a journey and yet neglects to observe the Passover, that person shall then be cut off from his people, for he did not present the offering of the Lord at its appointed time. That man shall bear its sin.
So being able to celebrate the Passover is celebrating that you are a part of Yah's people, Israel.
Yeah.
It's a celebration of the covenantal relationship between Yah and his people. So choosing to not celebrate Passover, especially when you understand its significance, is choosing to make light of your relationship with Adonai and also with his people, because we're all celebrating it together, celebrating the fact that we're in covenant with him, we're in covenant with each other. So obviously, in our walk of following the Master Yeshua, celebrating Passover continues to be of great importance. So this subject of Passover, we talked about this before. It should be a topic of lengthy discussion with a potential spouse, just to make sure you're on the same page with these things, because it's a very, very deep conversation. You want to make sure that you are doing the things that you both feel are important to do with that. So take the time to have those conversations. Talk about the hows, the whens, the wheres, most especially the whys of your Passover observance. But this also brings up a topic of marital covenant celebration, as we commonly call them, anniversaries. These days can and should be celebrations of your covenant and commitment with each other. And these days should not be taken lightly. It should not be brushed off and just, I don't, we've been married now for 25, 28 years and just, it should not be taken lightly. These are celebrations of your covenant relationship with each other. You need to find ways to make the anniversary special. Just think about the ways that we go about making the Passover special. There's things that we only do on that one day of the year. There's special dishes, there's special tablecloths. I mean, everything about it is so special. We're celebrating that covenant relationship. But the relationship between you and your spouse is also something that needs to have those kind of elements.
Correct. And it doesn't have to be expensive. We're not talking about going and spending, $150 on one person's meal. You could have a picnic in your living room. You could have a picnic in your car. It's a matter of just doing something and acknowledging that person that you are in covenant with. It's a matter of just even sharing your vows with each other, or maybe re-watching your wedding video, or re-looking at the pictures again and be like, oh, do you remember this day? And just reminiscing about that, and about that special relationship that you have with that person.
Finding joy in each other. Just like these guys, they were upset that they were not going to be able to do this Passover. The same kind of zeal should be there for being so gung-ho about wanting to celebrate the anniversaries of the relationship, and not necessarily just on that one day a year, but definitely on that one day a year. Just like definitely on Passover, you're going to do this. That's true. That's good. Let's go forward to the end of the chapter and let's read verses 20 through 23.
Okay. If sometimes the cloud remains a few days over the tabernacle, according to the command of the Lord, they remain camped. Then according to the commandment of the Lord, they set out. If sometimes the cloud remained from evening until morning, when the cloud was lifted in the morning, they would move out. Or if it remained in the daytime and at night, whenever the cloud was lifted, they would set out. Whether it was 2 days or a month or a year that the cloud lingered over the tabernacle, staying above it, the sons of Israel remained camped and did not set out. But when it was lifted, they set out. At the command of the Lord, they camped, and at the command of the Lord, they set out. They kept the Lord's charge according to the commandment of the Lord through Moses. Wow.
So, verse 23, that's just a good synopsis for this whole little section. Israel camped at Yah's command, literally at his mouth, and they departed at his mouth, at his command. Really just focusing in on 20 through 22, that they never knew how long they would camp. For a night, a few days, a month, a year, they just followed the cloud. So we could compare, again, Israel's encampments to stages or seasons in our lives, just, looking at this idea of stages and seasons. We don't know the length of a season that we're in presently. We have to be sensitive to the purpose of the season that's been given to us. And when it's been completed, then Yah is going to lead us into that next season. So we have to We have to recognize the season that we're in. We have to accept the season that we're in.
Yeah.
And we also need to function in the season. I mean, most importantly, we can't afford to just waste time and miss the benefit that Yah has intended. He brought us into this season to receive some kind of a benefit, something that we're going to need later in the next season. So we have to take advantage of the one that we're in now.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I've moved a couple times, but I've moved because God has said move. You know, I mean, to me, I feel like that's my cloud moment, you know, of God saying, okay, go ahead and move. You know, I can tell when he is ready to go ahead and do something in my life. And he's like, okay, time for you to go ahead and move. And it's interesting to be able to see that, you know, over the years of him just being like, okay, time for you to move here and time to move here. And I've moved across country twice, you know, to states I have not lived in before, to, you know, cultures I haven't been in before, you know, from the south to the, I guess, is that Northwest, or I don't know what New Mexico is considered, but you know, it was odd. And so
you went from the north to the southwest to the south.
Yeah, there we go. And so very different from Wisconsin to New Mexico to Tennessee. You know, I mean, those are three different places that are completely different from each other, you know. But it's like when God tells you to move, you know. And if you want to know more details about the story, feel free, you know, to email us at contactus@hebrewshebrew.com, and I can definitely share with you, you know, in more detail in regards to that, because it's a matter of learning to listen to what God has to say and be in that season that you're in.
It's great.
Yeah.
That's a great segue into the next portion, chapter 10, verse 1 through 10. I'm going to call this, Are You Listening? So we could go ahead and read this, but the main point is there's some silver trumpets that were made, and they had some particular purposes to either break camp or to gather the people for an assembly, and also for war, you know, for war calls. There were specific purposes, and there was different signals that were used for different things. So you really had to listen in order to discern the different sounds, because the different sounds called for a different response. In the camp of Israel, listening and discerning, it was a requirement.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like just imagine, you know, you hear the trumpet call, you think it's the one that is for assembling, but it's for breaking camp, or it's the one that's supposed to call the leaders there, but you think it's the one to call everybody, so you just show up and like, oh, what am I doing here? You know, so you really had to pay attention to the signals that were being given by these trumpets.
Yeah.
So let's relate this to signals and relationships. We've done this in past videos talking about nonverbal signals. Don't know how far back you would have to go. Really good stuff that we talked about in nonverbal signals, but there's also equally important, you know, to listen and correctly interpret the verbalized signals that we're getting from our relationship partners.
Yeah, that's very true. You know, it's a matter of what are those signals. You know, when you are visually able to see somebody, what are they telling you? Or even, what is their lack of communication telling you, say like in a text message or in a video chat that you're doing with somebody, or, you know, Facebook commenting. You know, it's a matter of what are they trying to tell you? What are they signaling to you? You know, are they interested or are they not interested? Ladies, a guy, if he's interested in you, he's going to be messaging you. He's going to be contacting you. He's going to be wanting to get to know you. He's going to be asking you questions about who you are and what you're about and wanting to know those things. If he's not interested, guess what? He's not going to communicate it to you. He's not going to ask those questions. He might talk more about himself, you know, versus asking you questions to get to know who you are. You know, Mark knows that I like certain kind of peanut butter cups. He knows what kind of ice cream I like. He knows how to make my coffee. Like, he learned that in the first week of us being married, but even before that, in regards to us dating, you know, he knew how to make my coffee. He knew what color my creamer needed to be inside of my coffee, you know, and that's because he wanted to get to know me. versus other guys, they could care less. You know, they're not going to go ahead and do that. And so it goes back to communication. Communication is key in relationships.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just hearing when the other person says no.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
or yes.
Yeah.
Yes or no. Both
Yeah.
both equally important. When a person says yes, you get to go ahead. But
Yep.
when they say no, they mean no. And also, like, just relating it to the different kind of signals that they would get from these trumpets, we can talk a little bit about tone of voice, because tone of voice can be like different subtle things that are going on. It can be the difference between someone being playful or somebody being hurt.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you really have to kind of key in not just to what they're saying, but how they're saying it.
Yeah.
You know, just to be able to interpret signals correctly, so that you don't end up doing things that you shouldn't be doing, so that you don't end up, you know, in a leaders meeting when you're not supposed to be there. You don't end up trying to break camp all by yourself when you're supposed to be going to the tent meeting.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just, you know, so that you don't end up doing things that you're really not supposed to be doing, the other person isn't asking for.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah.
Can you Shema? We haven't talked about Shema in a while, but we probably laid that foundation pretty well. It's actually hearing and responding appropriately.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really knowing what the other person is saying, paying attention, and then giving the appropriate response.
Yeah.
That's what we need to be able to do with our relationship partners, and that's what they need to be able to do with us. And if they're not doing that with you, then, you know, that's equally important and disturbing.
Yeah, you know, it's setting those right expectations of, okay, who's going to call who when? You know, what time is that going to be? You know, what kind of visit are we going to go ahead and have? You know, when you're meeting somebody for the first time, you want to know those expectations. Am I hugging you? Am I not hugging you? Are we doing handshakes? You know, is it going to be a kiss on the cheek, or is it not? You know, or I'm not prepared for that right now. I'm fine with a sideways hug, you know? It's a matter of setting those expectations, and if one person is not going to bring it up, it's okay to go ahead and bring it up. Somebody bring it up, you know? Somebody have the conversation to go ahead and set those expectations.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a few verses later in chapter 10, verses 29 through 32. This is a little interaction between Moses and his brother-in-law.
29 through 32?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then Moses said to Hobab, the son of Reuel, the Mennonite, Moses' father-in-law, we are setting out to the place of which the Lord said, I will give to you. Come with us, and we will do you good, for the Lord has promised good concerning Israel. But he said to him, I will not come, but rather will go to my own land and relatives. And then he said, please do not leave us, inasmuch as you know where we should camp in the wilderness. You will be as eyes for us. So it will be, if you go with us, it will come about that whatever good the Lord does for us, we will do for you.
So, you know, just wanted to, you know, briefly talk about this, because it is an interaction between a man and his brother-in-law. It's the great leader Moses and his, you know, brother-in-law. So it's even more interesting. But he speaks to his brother-in-law about staying with Israel, continuing with them to the promised land. And Kovav, he's a little reluctant. He desires instead to return to Midian, to his own family, to his relatives. But Moses convinces Kovav to stay through showing him his great value and function for Israel in the wilderness. And of course, it doesn't literally say here what he chose to do. You have to trace that through the scripture and look at the descendants to see that more than likely he did get him to stay. Anyway, just looking at what happened here how was Moses able to convince him to stay? He talked to him in such a way that he recognized his value. Mm-hmm. He recognized that he had a role or a function, and he encouraged him to stay involved, to stay with them, and to walk and function in that role that he knew that he could do. Mm-hmm. So are we able to do this? Yeah. Are we able to do this? Yes, with a spouse. This is paramount. This is big time, you know, with your spouse, to be able to recognize their value, to recognize their role and their function, encourage them to walk in it. Can you also do this with your friends, with the people in your faith community?
Yeah.
Can you recognize that someone in your faith community is gifted at something, and maybe they don't think that they're all that gifted with it, and they're kind of shrinking back from it? Are you able to recognize it and encourage them to go ahead and walk in that and to fulfill in that? I mean, this can play out in all the relationships. Being able to recognize people's potential, their value, a role they're suited for, and encourage them to walk in it.
Yeah, that's true. It's a matter of encouraging the people around you, and showing that they have value, even if it's just value in your life of, thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for, the acts that you do, or, whatever it might be. It could be a simple word of thank you, to somebody, and that could help them out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, now we've gotten to a turning point in the book of Numbers. We've gotten through chapter 10, and everything has been pretty okay up to this point. But now the downward spiral is about to begin. Chapter 11 is just a turning point where things just go from bad to worse to ugly for Israel. And we're going to talk about a few of these things. Chapter 11, there's a few verses that I'm going to point out here, and I may just go ahead and read them. Verse 1 says, particularly I want to read it in this version because it doesn't really come across this way in other versions. You'll have to look at some of the roots of the words to get this. It came to be, when the people were as complainers, it was evil in the ears of Adonai. And Adonai heard it, and his displeasure burned, and the fire of Adonai burned among them and consumed those in the outskirts of the camp. So there was some complaining going on, and the word that is there is actually the Hebrew word ra. It's the Hebrew word for evil, which is a big subject. But I mean, the things that they were doing were going to cause pain, suffering, bad things was going to come out of this complaining stuff. And that's why it was evil, ra, in his eyes. In verse 4, it says that the mixed multitude who were in their midst lusted greatly. So the children of Israel also wept again and said, who is giving us meat to eat? In verse 18, it says, and say to the people, set yourselves apart for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat, because you have wept in the hearing of Adonai, saying, who is giving us meat to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt, in Mitzrayim, and Adonai shall give you meat, and you shall eat. You're not going to eat 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, but for a whole month of days, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes an abomination to you, because you have rejected Adonai, who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why did we come up out of Mitzrayim? Why did we come up out of Egypt? So these are, I mean, this whole chapter, you need to read it and really look at it and see all the things that are going on there. But basically what I see here is the downward spiral actually begins with this lusting. And let me just talk a little bit about lusting. Most people do just, you say the word lust and you associate it with a sexual thing. And it definitely, it's involved in that, like that's inside that category. But lusting is just a strong desire. It's not just a strong desire, but it's a desire that you have thought on until you've thought on it, and now you've got emotions that have become attached to it. So now you've got a strong desire that's got emotions. Your heart is all bent around this thing that you want. And that is really what a lust is. So yes, that could be for another person, for another man, another woman, but it could also be for many things. I mean, it could be for good things. I mean, you could lust for a spouse, you could lust for children, you could lust for a career, for having a faith community. I mean, these are all good things, but you could get your heart so emotionally involved in it that it actually becomes a lust, and it gets to the point where you will get to say to yourself an adage: the ends justify the means. And once you get to that point and you're letting your emotions completely run things, then chaos ensues.
Well, it's also like building an idol. You know, you can
Yes.
make those things an idol. I mean, that's eventually what's probably going to happen if you continue to allow yourself to lust after or be jealous for something that's not yours, you know? Now, there's nothing wrong with having a goal of trying to get there, but it's a matter of when it turns into a lust, you know? And I think all of us know when that happens, when it turns into something even more and we make it more of an idol, you know, and we make it more above God, you know, or above our relationships that we have with, you know, other people. And so it's looking at it as who's running your emotions, you know, who is in control of your emotions. Are you in control of your emotions? Is God in control of your emotions? Or are you allowing your emotions to be in control of them? You know, in other words, are you allowing them to take over everything and all your thoughts and everything that you're doing? Because then it becomes not good.
Yeah, what we need a balanced approach. We use this, you know, in a lot of ways. We say we need to have balance, but when we make decisions, we need a balanced approach. We don't need to go all the way to the side of emotions with these strong lust and things. We also don't need to go all the way to the side of logic.
Yeah.
Even though that may seem like the better choice sometimes, but it's like finding a proper balance. I don't know if I should use this analogy or not. I mean, it definitely dates me a little bit, but there was an old television show called Star Trek. I mean, the original Star Trek. Yeah. And you had these three main characters. There was Captain Kirk, and there was Spock, and then there was Dr. McCoy. And you've got Spock, who is complete logic. Yeah. And then you've got Dr. McCoy, who is all heart. He's all emotion. Yeah. But then you've got Captain Kirk, who is this mix. Yeah. He is the balance of it. Yeah. So not saying that you should go chase down Captain Kirk and make him your role model and things like that, but it's just a picture that, you know, to make those kind of decisions, you need to be able to have both of those in a balanced approach. Yeah, that's good. That's good. One last little thing, and really the heartbreaking thing that's here is in verse 20. We read it a second ago. It's that Yah felt rejected by his people. Yeah. And you know, basically that started with this lust. You know, that you want something, you think about it long enough, these emotions get attached to it. You start complaining that you can't get it. Even weeping and mourning, it's not fair, why can't I get, you know, all these things. And left unchecked, it can lead to rejecting his path. And rejecting his path is the same as rejecting him. You know, the thing that they did here is they said they wanted to go back to Egypt. They were like, we don't want to follow your path anymore, we'd just rather go back to Egypt. And that is what he called rejecting him. So we have to make sure that these things don't go unchecked, so that it doesn't lead to jeopardizing the most important relationship that you'll ever have, which is your relationship with Adonai. Correct. You know?
And if you realize that you are in that situation, and if you need to get help, reach out to your community, you know, reach out to your leadership and let them know, hey, I have a problem here, I need help. You know, sit down with God and be like, okay, God, I need your help. You know, and break that pattern of lust, break that pattern of that desire of whatever it might be, you know. And like we said, it could be something that you're really wanting, you know, and you have a goal to get to, but it just becomes your idol too much, where it's everything that you're thinking of, that it just consumes your world and you're forsaking God. So go back to God, you know, sit down with him, have a conversation with him, and be like, God, I'm so sorry. Let me get my life back in balance again. I need your help in this area. I need your help in that area, you know, because he is there willing to go ahead and help you. He is there listening, and he wants to help you.
He wants to help you.
He does.
You know, in fact, that's also a part of this. I almost should just read this whole chapter, but I'll encourage you to do that. James chapter 1, or Yaakov chapter 1, verses 13 through 15. Let no one say when he is enticed, I am enticed by Elohim, for Elohim is not enticed by evil matters. He entices no one. Here's the kicker. Each one is enticed when he is drawn away by his own desires and is trapped.
Yeah.
And then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it has been accomplished, it brings forth death. So do not go astray, my beloved brothers.
Yeah.
So I mean, he lays out this problem that we have with desires.
Yeah.
It's not wrong to have a desire, but when you let it get away from you, then it's going to turn into sin. And then the sin will eventually turn into death. That's what James was driving at.
Yeah.
And it's also the picture that we're getting here in these chapters. And unfortunately, we are going to see another case in point when we get to chapter 12.
Yep.
So, chapter 12, we are going to see an example of the fallout from unchecked, emotionally driven desires or lust. Again, a very short chapter, but let's see. Let's just read verses 1 and 2.
Okay. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us as well? And the Lord heard it.
So, it's going to go on from here. Adonai is going to call them out to the woodshed, and he's going to give them a good talking to. And they're going to get more than that. But, I mean, there's some really deep stuff here. So, I mean, there is some deep relationship issues going on here between Adonai and his spokesperson, Moses. Also between Moses and his siblings, his older siblings.
Yes.
Matter of fact, I mean, sometimes we have to remember that Mary was the oldest of these three, and Mary and Aaron Moses was baby brother.
Yeah.
So,
and he wasn't raised with them.
Wasn't raised with them.
I mean, if we look at that as well, he was not raised with them. They came back together again as adults.
Yep.
So I mean, when we look at this as well, it's a matter of, okay, how do we handle our siblings? Most of us were raised with our siblings. Well, for some people, you might not have been raised with some of your siblings. So how do you handle that now as an adult? You can't have your 2-year-old tantrum anymore, because now you're an adult, now you're 30 years old, and that doesn't work for a 30-year-old.
Does not work that way.
No.
So, just strictly from the text alone, we don't know exactly what the motivating factor between this was. It could be a few different things. We don't know what desire it was. We could say that they had a desire to also be recognized as, prophets, like kind of on par with their older brother. It could have been, they could have just taken issue with a few different aspects of the wife that he had taken. And we don't know what the problem was, going on there. We've got, brothers-in-law and sisters-in-law and all kinds of things going on there. What we can at least learn from this is in verse 11, if we go ahead and read that, this is after they got their talking to, and Aaron says to Moses, "O my master, please don't hold against us the sin in which we have done foolishly, in which we have sinned." So fortunately, Mary and Aaron, they were able to receive their rebuke.
Yeah.
And they were able to continue in relationship with Moses for many years after this. This is just the beginning of Numbers, and they're going to go for years and years and years. So they continue to be in relationship with Moses, even after this, because they were able to take their rebuke and they were able to learn the lesson.
Yeah.
But what can we learn just about, the things that happened here in this chapter? And that is that our deepest and our most enduring relationships, just think the relationship between Israel and Adonai, that's chapter 11. Or we could say wife and husband, Israel and Yah is their husband. We can look at siblings, Moses and Aaron and Aaron and Miriam. they put these things in serious jeopardy,
Yeah.
because of emotionally driven desires. These things give rise to complaining and sin, rational lying to yourself. I don't know if you call it that little, but you rationalize things and you lie to yourself, rational lie to yourselves. And this is ultimately leading to death, rejecting the good things that you already have. So the thing that we have to do is we have to know, how can we cope with lust?
Yeah.
How can we manage our lusts? And again, we're not talking about just sexual stuff. It's how do we manage these desires that we have for any number of things that we've allowed, that we've dwelt on long enough to get emotions attached to it, and now we're willing to do things that we wouldn't normally do to achieve those ends.
Yeah.
So how can we manage this stuff? How does your spouse or your potential spouse, how do they cope with lust? Can you have this conversation? Can you honestly just talk with each other and be like, what do you deal with and how do you manage it? I mean, it's deep, but it's definitely something to do before moving on to the level of engagement and certainly marriage.
Yeah, it is.
So wow, we've been talking for a little while, but there's so much good stuff that is going on in this portion of Scripture. So much to discuss and evaluate our relationships, both with Adonai, with Yah, and with man. We talked about being prepared for our next season of life, maybe marriage, and you need to do that how? By taking advantage of the season that you're in. We discussed celebrating your covenantal relationships, both with Adonai, with Israel, and also with your spouse, doing special, extraordinary acts on these days that really, make you truly let the other person know that you value them highly, and you really just appreciate the relationship that you have with them. Following the cloud, we talked about that. We talked about the way that it helps you to recognize that we've got seasons in our lives, and that we need to be following Yah through all those seasons. The trumpets, looking at the trumpets and their functions, it showed us that we need to be listening and signaling. We both listen and signal. We do both. But we need to be listening and signaling to our relationship partners about our needs, about our desires, about our expectations. We talked about our own ability to be able to perceive potential in others, to encourage them to function in their role. And then we went into the downward spiral. And we talked about, complaining driven by the strong emotional desires, the lusts, about what happens when you don't have a balanced approach to making your decisions. You get things like we have here in chapter 11, which will ultimately lead to rejecting the good thing that Adonai has promised to you. So so many things here. We saw the fallout in chapter 12, with some lusts going on there. They weren't spoken. We don't know exactly what they were, but there was something driving that bus. And we need to make sure that we've got the right balance of logic and emotion driving the bus. So, it's been a valuable journey. I think, overall, it's learning truly how to value your relationships and protect them.
And that's all of them, not just your marriage relationships and your relationships with your kids, but relationships with your parents and your siblings, and even your coworkers. It's a matter of, showing value and saying, hey, thank you for being in my life. Thank you for the things that you've done, in my life, and for helping me become the person that God created me to go ahead and be, because it's part of our story, that's part of our life and part of our season that we're in. And so we need to thank the people around us, because they're the ones that have shaped us, along with God, of who we are. So, well, we're grateful you guys have tuned in. So thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. You can find us, of course, on Facebook and Instagram. And you can always email us as well at contactus@hebrewshebrew.com. And also, if you're looking for a spouse, we would love for you to be able to join the website as well. And we'll just see you next time. Bye.
Shalom, guys.